I'm Anna Mitchell, 38 years old, and I never imagined my own family could turn on me so brutally. It was Christmas dinner in Lincoln, Nebraska, the table buzzing with holiday chatter. I'd spent hours preparing my hands, still aching from work I'd poured into keeping this family afloat. Then my dad's voice sliced through the noise. "You are just a burden. We want to live without you. Get out right now." The words hit like a slap. My mom sat there giggling, swirling her wine glass, not saying a word. My sister stared at her plate, avoiding my eyes. The guests froze, forks hovering. My chest burned, but I didn't let a tear fall. I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out into the biting Nebraska night, my steps steady despite the chaos in my heart. I could hear whispers behind me, but I didn't look back. I'd given everything, my dreams, my savings for them, and this was their thanks. Have you ever been betrayed by the ones you love most? Share your story in the comments, tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to see how I turn the tables. The next morning, I pulled into Mark's driveway in Lincoln, my suitcase rattling in the trunk. Mark, my boyfriend, opened the door before I could knock, his eyes soft with concern. "You okay?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. I nodded, but my throat tightened. I hadn't slept, the sting of my dad's words still raw. Inside, his small living room felt like a sanctuary far from that Christmas dinner table. I set my laptop on his kitchen counter, hands trembling, and logged into my bank account. I needed to know where I stood after walking away. The screen loaded and my heart sank. The joint account I shared with my sister, meant for family bills, was down thousands of dollars. I scrolled through the transactions, my pulse racing. There it was, multiple transfers, each labeled Rachel's Boutique Project. My sister had funneled over $10,000 into some failed fashion venture without a word to me. I managed that account, but I'd been too busy paying the family's electric, water, and mortgage bills, nearly $2,000 a month, to check it closely. She'd counted on that. I leaned back, my breath catching. Years ago, I'd poured my heart into my graphic design studio, building it from nothing. Clients loved my work. I was booked months out. But when my dad's medical bills piled up and my sister's freelance gigs dried up, I sold the studio to keep the family afloat. I paid for everything, their heat, their water, even the roof over their heads, while they treated me like an ATM. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just demands. Last night proved it, my dad calling me a burden, my mom giggling over her wine, my sister silent. I'd sacrificed my dream for them, and they didn't care. I opened another tab, pulling up the auto payment portal for the family's utilities. My finger hovered over the screen. I thought of my dad's voice, sharp and cold. "We want to live without you." Fine, I thought. Let's see how they manage. I clicked into the electric company's site first. With one tap, I canceled the monthly payment tied to my card. The water bill was next canceled. Then the mortgage, the one I'd been covering since my dad's surgery left them strapped. I hit delete on the auto draft. My hands steady now. A weight lifted, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. Mark watched me from across the counter, stirring his coffee. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice calm but searching. I met his gaze, my jaw tight. "They made their choice," I said. "Now I'm making mine." I closed the laptop, the screen going dark. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of control. My family thought they could push me out and keep cashing my checks. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Mark set his mug down, leaning closer. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said. I nodded, grateful, but my mind was already racing. I'd given up my studio, my savings, my life for them. No more. I pulled out my phone, checking job boards for freelance design gigs. I needed to rebuild, and I wasn't waiting for their apologies. My sister's betrayal stung deep, as she'd taken my money, my trust, and said nothing while our dad threw me out. I wasn't just cutting their bills, I was cutting them out of my future. I stood pacing Mark's kitchen, my resolve hardening. The family's house, their lights, their water, it was all on them now. I'd spent years carrying their weight, believing it was my duty. But duty doesn't mean being used. I glanced at my phone again, a new email popping up, a potential client, a small business needing a logo. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I looked at Mark, his steady presence grounding me. I'm done being their safety net, I said, my voice firm. He nodded, a small smile breaking through. I turned back to my laptop, ready to take the next step. 2 days later, I sat on Mark's couch, my mind still reeling. Mark sat beside me, his hand resting on mine. "Talk to me," he said, his voice steady. I let it spill, the betrayal, the years of paying their bills, the way my sister stayed silent while I was humiliated. My voice cracked, but I kept going, the weight of it all pouring out. "I gave up everything for them," I said, "and they called me a burden." Mark leaned forward, his eyes serious. "You know, I had a friend back in college," he started. His parents leaned on him for money, used his savings for their debts, then blamed him when things went south. He kept giving, thinking it'd earn their respect. It didn't. He only got his life back when he stopped. He paused, looking at me. "You deserve better, Anna. Set your boundaries now, or they'll keep taking." His words hit hard, like a door swinging open. I'd been trapped in their cycle too long, always the one to fix things, to pay up, to sacrifice. I grabbed my laptop, my resolve sharpening. The auto-payment portal was still open from when I'd canceled the main bills. There were smaller ones left, internet, phone, even my dad's car insurance, all tied to my account. I logged in, my fingers moving fast. One by one, I shut them down, click, click, click. Each cancellation felt like cutting a chain. The phone bill was last. I hesitated, then hit confirm. No going back. They wanted to live without me. They could start now. My phone buzzed, my dad's number flashing. I braced myself and answered. "Anna, what's going on?" He barked, his voice sharp. "The lights are out, the water's off." "What did you do?" I gripped the phone. My heart pounding, but my voice steady. "You said I was a burden, Dad. You told me to get out. I'm just giving you what you wanted." He sputtered. "You're overreacting. Turn it all back on now." Overreacting. The word stung, but I didn't flinch. "You chose this," I said, my tone cold. "You don't get to demand my help anymore." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking, but my mind clear. Mark nodded from across the room, a quiet pride in his eyes. I opened my laptop again, this time to job boards. My graphic design studio was gone, but I still had my skills. I scrolled through listings, logos, branding, website mock-ups. A local coffee shop needed a menu redesign. A startup wanted a full brand package. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a flicker of excitement cutting through the anger. I drafted an email to the coffee shop, attaching my portfolio. It was small, but it was mine. I wasn't just cutting ties with my family. I was building something new. Mark brought me a coffee, setting it on the table. "You're stronger than they'll ever know," he said. I managed a small smile, the first in days. My sister's betrayal, my dad's demands, they couldn't touch me here. I sent another email, this time to the startup, my confidence growing. A week later, my phone lit up with my sister's name. I was in kitchen sipping coffee, trying to focus on a logo sketch for a new client. I hesitated, then answered. Rachel's voice came through, sharp and accusing. "You're so selfish, Anna," she spat. "You cut us off without a word. Do you know what you're doing to Mom and Dad?" I clenched my jaw. Her words sparking anger. Selfish. "After everything I'd given Rachel," I said, my voice low. "I know about the money. $10,000 siphoned off for your failed fashion project. You thought I wouldn't notice." Silence hung on the line. Then she scoffed. "You're making this about me?" Typical. I could hear her typing, probably already spinning her story. "You took my trust," I said. "You don't get to lecture me." I hung up, my pulse hammering. 2 days later, my mom showed up at Mark's door. Mark let her in, his face tense but polite. Susan stood in the living room, her hands twisting together. Anna, we're struggling, she pleaded, her voice shaky. The bills are piling up, the house payment's late. Please turn the services back on. Her eyes were red, but I saw no regret, no apology for that night. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Mom, you laughed when Dad told me to get out. I said, my tone even, but firm. You let him call me a burden. Rachel used my money and you said nothing. This is on her, not me. Susan's face crumpled. We're family, she whispered. Family doesn't abandon each other. I shook my head. You abandoned me first, I said. I'm done carrying you all. She left, her shoulders slumped, but I felt no guilt. I'd spent years bailing them out. No more. That evening, my phone buzzed with notifications. I opened Facebook and there it was. Rachel's post pinned at the top of her profile. Some people turn their backs on family when they need them most, it read. Anna Mitchell thinks she's better than us, leaving her parents and sister to struggle. Shame on her. My stomach twisted, not from hurt but from fury. She'd painted me as the villain, twisting the truth to save face. I scrolled through the comments, neighbors, old friends, even distant relatives chiming in. How could she do that? One wrote. Ungrateful, another said. My cousin Brian had shared the post, adding, heard they're barely getting by now. The post was spreading like wildfire in Lincoln's tight-knit community, each share chipping away at my family's reputation. Mark sat beside me, his hand on my shoulder. They're lashing out because they're desperate, he said. I nodded, but the sting of Rachel's words lingered. I could have posted my side, how I'd paid their bills, how Rachel stole from me, how they threw me out, but I didn't. Let them talk. I wasn't the one hiding the truth. I refreshed the page, watching the comments pile up. A local business owner I'd worked with messaged me privately. Is this true? I thought you were better than that. I didn't reply. Lincoln was small and gossip traveled fast. My family's name was sinking and they had no one to blame but themselves. I turned off my phone, focusing on my laptop instead. Another client email had come in, a boutique needing a website redesign. I drafted a response, my fingers steady. Rachel could scream on social media all she wanted. I wasn't backing down. My family thought they could guilt me into returning, but their words no longer held power. I glanced at Mark, who was scrolling through his phone, frowning at the post. You don't need their approval, he said, looking up. You're building something better. I nodded, a quiet strength settling in. The community might judge me now, but I'd show them who I was through my actions, not their lies. 3 weeks later, my family's world was crumbling. Word reached me through a mutual friend their house in Lincoln had gone dark. No electricity, no running water. A foreclosure notice was taped to their front door, the bank's red ink screaming unpaid debts. My sister's so-called boutique project had collapsed entirely, costing her a major design contract with a local retailer. She couldn't pay the rent on her office space, and they'd locked her out. My dad, desperate, had taken up odd repair jobs, fixing leaky faucets, patching drywall, but the pay was barely enough for groceries, let alone saving their home. I heard it all secondhand, and each detail tightened a knot in my chest. Not guilt, but a dull ache for the parents I'd once idolized. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Rachel's name flashed first. Anna, you've ruined us, she shouted when I picked up. No power, no water, how could you? Her voice dripped with blame, as if I'd forced her to drain my account. You took $10,000 for your project. I shot back, my tone sharp. You don't get to play victim now. She hung up, her silence louder than her words. Then my dad called, his voice hoarse. David, I said, cutting him off before he could start. You told me to get out. I'm not your bank anymore. He tried again, softer. We're losing everything. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. You lost me first, I said, and ended the call. Each rejection felt like a brick in a wall I was building around myself, solid but heavy. I turned my focus to my work, the one thing I could control. My laptop glowed with new emails, clients needing logos, flyers, website mock-ups. The coffee shop I'd pitched to in Lincoln had signed on, thrilled with my menu design. A startup sent a contract for a full branding package, their feedback brimming with praise. I worked from Mark's dining table, sketching ideas, tweaking color palettes. Every completed project fueled a fire in me, a sense of strength I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding piece by piece the life I'd let my family take away. Another call came. Rachel again. "Please, Anna," she begged, her voice breaking. "We're drowning. Just pay the electric bill." I gripped my phone, my resolve unwavering. "You made your choices, Rachel," I said. "Live with them." I hung up my hand, steady but my heart twisting. I thought of my mom, picturing her in that dark house, her silence at that dinner table still stinging. I loved them once deeply, but love didn't mean letting them use me. I pushed the thought aside, opening a new design file. A local bakery needed a logo, and I dove in, sketching curves and flourishes, losing myself in the work. The news of my family's struggles spread through Lincoln. A neighbor texted me, asking if the rumors were true. Lights off, house at risk. I didn't respond. My dad's repair jobs weren't enough, and Rachel's reputation as a designer was tanking after her contract fell through. They were paying the price for their choices, just as I'd paid for mine all those years, pouring my savings into their lives. I felt a pang thinking of my parents' faces, their pride unraveling. But I'd given enough. I sent an invoice to the startup, my bank account growing with every job. Each dollar was mine, earned by my hands, not theirs. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my latest design. The bakery logo was bold, vibrant, exactly what they'd asked for. I smiled, a quiet pride settling in. My family's chaos was theirs to fix now. I was done being their crutch. I saved my work, sent the file, and checked my email for new leads. A small museum in Lincoln wanted a brochure, another opportunity, another step forward. I wasn't looking back. 2 months later, I heard my family had sold their house. They'd moved into a cramped rental apartment on the outskirts of Lincoln, a far cry from the home I'd kept afloat for years. The news came through a former neighbor, her voice hushed over the phone. My dad and my sister were barely speaking to anyone, she said, and my mom was keeping to herself. I set my phone down, a flicker of sadness passing through me, but it didn't linger. I'd carried their burdens long enough. That evening, my phone chimed with a voicemail from my mom. I played it, her voice soft and halting. "Anna, I'm sorry for what happened at Christmas," Susan said. "We shouldn't have treated you that way. I hope you're okay." No mention of fixing things, no acknowledgement of the years I'd sacrificed, just words empty and late. I deleted the message without replying, my heart steady. I'd spent too long waiting for apologies that changed nothing. My focus was elsewhere now, on myself, on my future. I'd been pouring my energy into rebuilding my career. After weeks of freelance gigs, I took a leap and rented a small office space downtown, a corner unit with enough room for a desk and my design tools. I named it Mitchell Design Studio, a nod to the dream I'd lost years ago. The first day I walked in, keys jangling in my hand, I felt a rush of pride. This was mine, no one could take it away. I set up my laptop, hung a few sample prints on the walls, and got to work. A local bookstore had hired me for a branding overhaul, logo, signage, even a website. Their owner emailed excited about my initial drafts. Another client, a Lincoln gym, wanted posters and social media graphics. My inbox was buzzing, each project a step toward something bigger. Mark was there every step of the way. He helped me move my equipment into the office, lugging monitors and boxes up the stairs. "This place is perfect," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. I smiled, grateful for his unwavering support. We'd grown closer these past months, our bond deepening through late-night talks and shared meals. One evening, as we grabbed coffee at a cafe near my new office, he reached for my hand. "You're unstoppable," he said, his eyes warm. I squeezed his hand back, feeling a spark of joy I hadn't known in years. With Mark, I wasn't just rebuilding my career, I was building a life. I spent my days sketching, tweaking designs, and meeting clients. The bookstore owner stopped by, thrilled with the new logo's bold lines. The gym sent a glowing review booking me for another project. My bank account was growing not from family demands but from my own work. I thought briefly of my sister, her failed boutique a distant memory, and my dad struggling in that small apartment. Their choices had led them there, not mine. I pushed the thought away, focusing on a new email, a museum wanting a series of exhibit posters. I dove in sketching concepts, my mind alive with ideas. Mark joined me at the office one afternoon, bringing takeout from my favorite taco place. We sat on the floor laughing over spilled salsa, planning a weekend hike. "You've come so far," he said, his voice soft but proud. I nodded, a warmth spreading through me. My studio was small, but it was a start. My clients were local, but they trusted me. And Mark, he was more than a boyfriend now. He was my partner in every sense. I looked around my office, the walls bare but full of possibility. This was my new beginning, and I was ready for it. 6 months later, I was fully on my own. My family had faded into silence, no more calls, no more pleas. I'd heard through the grapevine that my cousin Brian was still stirring the pot, whispering to anyone who'd listen about the Mitchells' downfall. Their name carried a shadow now in Lincoln, a reminder of their choices. I didn't care to correct the rumors. My focus was my life, my studio, my future. I'd cut every tie to my past, and for the first time, I felt free. My days were filled with work at Mitchell Design Studio. Clients kept coming, a cafe needed a new sign, a nonprofit wanted a campaign logo, a school asked for event flyers. My office buzzed with energy, my sketches piling up on the desk. I'd built something real, something mine, from the ashes of the life I'd lost. Every contract signed, every invoice paid was a victory. Lincoln's community was starting to know my name, not as the daughter of a struggling family, but as a designer who delivered. One evening, Mark took me to our favorite park by the sunken gardens. The air was warm, the sky streaked with pink. He was quieter than usual, his hand tight around mine. We stopped by the pond, the water glinting under the fading light. He turned to me, his eyes steady. "Anna," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "You've rebuilt everything on your own terms. I want to build a life with you." He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring. My breath caught, not from surprise, but from the weight of his words. I nodded, tears prickling my eyes. "Yes," I whispered. He slipped the ring on my finger, and we stood there, wrapped in each other, the world fading away. We planned a small wedding, just us and a few close friends in that same park. On the day I wore a white sundress, nothing fancy, but it felt right. Mark stood under a canopy of oaks, his smile brighter than the June sun. We exchanged vows, promising to support each other, to build a life of trust. The ceremony was short, the reception just a picnic with music and laughter. I looked around at the faces, friends who'd cheered my journey, who saw me for who I was. My family wasn't there, and I didn't miss them. This was my new beginning, surrounded by people who valued me. Later, as we danced under string lights, I thought about the road I'd traveled. I'd given everything to a family who took me for granted, who called me a burden when I stopped giving. Walking away was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it taught me something vital: you have to set boundaries to protect yourself. I learned to stand up, to say no, to choose people who lift you up instead of dragging you down. Mark was that person for me, steady and kind, never asking me to be less than I was. My studio, my clients, my life, they were proof I could rebuild without their weight. "I want to leave you with this family" doesn't mean obligation. It's okay to walk away from those who hurt you, to build a life with people who see your worth. I did it, and I'm stronger for it. If you've faced family conflict, how did you find your way through? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you reclaimed your life.
My name is Megan Jansen. I'm 29 years old, and until last week, I thought I knew what my future looked like. I thought I was engaged to a man I could trust. I thought we were building something steady, maybe not exciting to outsiders, but real solid. But love doesn't crumble with a single scream or a slammed door. Sometimes it collapses in silence. Sometimes it takes 10 words. Don't wait up. Don't make a scene. We'll talk tomorrow. That was Harry's last message to me. I'd read it a dozen times before dawn found me barefoot on a deserted stretch of sand staring at the bruised sky. My phone felt like a weight I no longer wanted to carry, so I left it behind on the hotel nightstand. Out here, the only sound was the ocean. Even the gulls seemed to avoid me. I remember thinking, so this is what the end feels like, not loud, not violent, but hollow. But I need to tell you how it began because endings never make sense without the story that leads to them. Harry and I had been drifting for months. He said I was always buried in work, and he wasn't wrong. At the architecture firm, I was climbing long hours tight, deadlines. A client whose impossible skyscraper revisions had eaten half my year. I carried that stress home like a second skin. Dinners turned into takeout boxes eaten in silence. Our conversations slipped from laughter and dreams to grocery lists and overdue bills. I noticed the way he sighed when I opened my laptop at night, how his hand, once instinctively reaching for mine, now stayed in his pocket. When he looked at me, it wasn't with anger, it was worse. It was boredom. I thought I could fix it. That's what I told myself when I booked the trip. 7 days in Mexico, sun and sand, no work emails, no distractions. Just us. When I showed him the confirmation, Harry's face lit up with something I hadn't seen in months, a genuine smile. You did this for us, he'd asked, eyes softening. For us, I repeated, clinging to the hope in his voice. He kissed me then, and for a moment it felt like the old days. I let myself believe we could rewind. The first 2 days we did. We swam until our skin pruned, ordered cocktails with umbrellas, left the balcony doors open while we made love to the rhythm of the waves. I could almost feel the knot in my chest loosening. But then came day 3. We met her at the swim-up bar, Lila. She was the kind of woman people orbit without realizing they're doing it. Sun-kissed skin, glossy hair that felt like she'd stepped out of a shampoo commercial, and that expensive ease of someone who has never been told no. We swam up together, Harry and I waiting to order drinks. Lila's eyes flicked over me, once polite, but when she looked at Harry, her smile lingered. Not many men can pull off plain white trunks with that kind of confidence, she teased, her voice low, practiced. Harry chuckled, actually blushed, and introduced himself. Her hand rested on his arm as though it belonged there. Harry, she repeated, tasting his name. Then, without looking at me, she added, You've just improved this whole resort's rating. I wanted to roll my eyes, but Harry laughed like it was the cleverest thing he'd ever heard. The hours blurred after that. Around the pool, Lila held court every story about Monaco yachts, private villas, weekends in Paris. Harry leaned in, like a schoolboy hanging on every word. I tried to engage. So what exactly do you do? I asked, not unkindly. She tilted her sunglasses, smirked. Venture capital, darling. Opportunities find me, if you know how to look. Her eyes slid back to Harry before I could reply. Later, while toweling off, Harry whispered wide-eyed, Lila says she has a private infinity pool in her villa. Can you imagine I can, I said flatly. But I also have a project deadline in 6 weeks. He sighed. It's not about money, Megan. It's the energy, the spontaneity. That word energy became her weapon. Mine was heavy serious, hers magnetic. That night was the resort's white party. Music thumped through the humid air. Champagne glasses clinked under strobe lights. Harry wore a linen shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. I thought he looked handsome, but when Lila appeared in a flowing silk dress, his eyes never left her. I told Harry he looked incredible. He gave me a distracted smile, scanning the crowd until he found her. She raised her glass, and just like that, he was gone from me, pulled into her orbit as if by gravity. I sat at a table nursing a watered-down cocktail, watched as Lila whispered in his ear, watched as he threw his head back and laughed a sound I hadn't heard in months, watched her hand slide to the small of his back, intimate, claiming. I finally stood, heart hammering, and crossed to him. Harry, can I talk to you for a second? His eyes were glazed from champagne and adoration. What is it, Megan, away from the crowd, I urged. He rolled his eyes but followed me a few steps. God, can you just relax? We're on vacation. Don't be so boring. The word struck me harder than a slap. boring, the opposite of Lila's glittering chaos. "I'm not being boring," I said, my voice tight. "I'm being your fiancé. The way she touches you, it's disrespectful." He looked at me with pity, maybe contempt. "She's just fun. She's alive. You're always heavy." Then he turned back, letting her pull him onto the dance floor. And I watched. I watched his body pressed to hers, their laughter echoing louder than the bass. It wasn't just dancing, it was a performance for her, for him, for me. That was my cue to leave. Back in our room, I sat on the bed waiting. Hours blurred. The music faded downstairs. The resort fell quiet. I must have drifted until the phone buzzed. 3:42 a.m. The message. "Don't wait up. Don't make a scene. We'll talk tomorrow." 10 words that sliced clean through 4 years. I didn't cry. I did not scream. I just walked barefoot to the beach, the sand cool beneath my feet, the tide whispering, like it knew a secret I hadn't caught yet. The sky was bleeding into orange now, and I realized Harry thought he was buying himself time. He had no idea those words weren't a postponement. They were the end. Tomorrow there wouldn't be one for us. The strangest thing about heartbreak is how calm it can be. I thought I'd be shaking, crying, breaking dishes. Instead, I felt clean, as if someone had rinsed all the noise out of me and left nothing but silence. When I walked back into our hotel room that night, the air conditioning hummed its cold tune. The bed was untouched, on his side, my sandals by the door, and his shirt still draped over the chair where he'd left it earlier. I sat for a while staring at the clock's glowing red numbers. Then I stood, opened my suitcase, and began to pack. Not just my things, his too. Shirt by shirt, I folded them with an odd, precise care, as though I were handling the belongings of a stranger. His cologne bottle, his cufflinks, the sneakers he insisted were limited edition, all tucked neatly away. By the time I zipped the case shut, I felt detached like an executor closing out a will. I placed his suitcase by the door next to his wallet and watch. A neat little parcel of the man I no longer recognized. The hours between then and dawn stretched thin like the fragile skin of a soap bubble. I showered, letting the hot water sting my skin, scrubbing away salt and the faint trace of his cologne that clung to my hair. When I emerged, I dressed not for a vacation, but for travel jeans, sneakers, a cotton blouse. Clothes meant for moving forward. By the time the keycard clicked at 8:07 a.m., I was sitting in the armchair by the window ready. He slipped in, triumphant but disheveled. His hair was mussed, his shirt untucked, and he smelled faintly of champagne, mixed with a woman's floral perfume, Lila's perfume. When his eyes landed on me, dressed packed, waiting, something flickered. Surprise, maybe. Fear, briefly hidden. "You're up early," he muttered, reaching for the mini fridge. He pulled out a bottle of water, twisted the cap, and drank greedily. "I've been up," I said. My voice was flat strange even to my own ears. He leaned against this counter, studying me. I could almost see the gears turning. He was crafting a script, preparing excuses the way he always did when caught out in something small. Only this wasn't small. "Look, Megan," he sighed dramatically, as if he were weary from carrying a burden. "About last night, it just happened okay. She showed me a world you could never give me." There it was, the rehearsed justification wrapped in cheap profundity. I let the words hang in the room, absurd in their cruelty. He expected a reaction, anger, tears, a plea. Something to reassure him that I still cared enough to fight. Instead, I stood, picked up his suitcase, and held it out to him. "No." He blinked. "No what?" "No to all of it. No to pretending this is something we can talk through. You made your choice." My voice was eerily calm, as if I were commenting on the weather. He didn't take the suitcase. His confidence wavered. "So that's it. You're just leaving." "You left last night," I said. It wasn't accusation. It was fact. I set the suitcase down beside him and walked to the door, my own bag slung over my shoulder. I didn't look back at him, at the room, or at the broken fragments of the life we were supposed to share. The door clicked shut behind me, final as a tomb. At the front desk, the receptionist gave me a bright smile. "Checking out already?" "Yes." "Megan Jansen, room 412, I said. "I've settled my incidentals. The room is paid through Saturday for Harry Alvarez. Any further charges are his alone." Her smile faltered for half a second, but she nodded politely, typing. "Of course. I hope you enjoyed your stay." "It was very enlightening," I replied. She handed me the receipt. I slid it into my bag, like closing the cover of a book. The taxi driver loaded my luggage into the trunk. As we pulled away, I looked back one last time. The resort shimmered in the morning light, all perfect pools and pristine beaches. It looked like a postcard, a fantasy for someone else's life. Mine was no longer here. On the flight home, I stared out at the endless blue. The Megan who had boarded this trip full of anxious hope no longer existed. Piece by piece, she'd been dismantled. In her place sat someone new, someone who understood that the most powerful response to betrayal wasn't revenge, it was absence. When the cab dropped me off at our apartment, the key in my hand felt foreign. The lock clicked, and the air inside greeted me with its faint, lemony clean smell. We'd always hated that cleaner, yet kept buying it out of habit. We, the word echoed hollowly. There was no we anymore. I set my bags by the door and walked through the apartment slowly, as if cataloging a museum exhibit. The framed photo from our hike in the Blue Ridge Mountains, his arm around me. The hideous vase his mother had gifted us that he insisted stay on the mantel. His half-finished crossword on the coffee table. All of it screamed us, and yet to me it was already past tense. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, I went to the bedroom closet, pulled out boxes, and began packing. His shirts, his suits, his sneakers lined up like obedient soldiers. Every trace of him folded and taped shut. By the time I was done, the bedroom looked lighter, almost spacious. Then I called the locksmith. While I waited, I scrolled through my phone. Blocked his number, blocked his sister's, blocked his mother's. Social media deleted and blocked. It was like cutting out a tumor, surgical and necessary. When the locksmith arrived, I watched him replace the deadbolt. He handed me the new keys, shiny and sharp. I closed my fist around them. This apartment was mine now. Clean, quiet, whole. I rented a small storage unit 10 minutes away. Packed the boxes into the trunk, stacked them neatly inside. On top of the pile, I taped an envelope with the access code, addressed it to Harry. Left it with the building superintendent, who didn't ask questions. By evening, his presence had been reduced to 6 cardboard boxes gathering dust in a rented cage. I returned to the apartment, locked the new door behind me, and sat in the silence. It was no longer oppressive. It was mine. And for the first time since Harry had looked at Lila instead of me, I could breathe. The quiet lasted 2 days. 2 days of silence so deep it felt medicinal. I filled it with small rituals, laundry, grocery shopping, unpacking my own suitcase. Ordinary acts that for once didn't include him. But then the calls began. The first was from an unfamiliar number. I shouldn't have answered, but habit won. Megan. What the hell is going on? It was Marissa, Harry's sister. Her voice came sharp, accusatory. I could almost picture her pacing her kitchen with her free hand on her hip, already deciding I was the villain. Marissa, I said evenly. Don't you Marissa me. Harry is hysterical. He says you changed the locks and stole all his stuff. Is that true? I let her words settle, then replied in the same flat calm I'd been practicing since Mexico. His things are in a storage unit. The access code is with the building superintendent. As for what happened, ask Harry. I'm not adding to his story. She huffed. So you did abandon him. Who does that? You can't just walk away from 4 years. I said, cutting her off gently. And I did. Goodbye, Marissa. I ended the call before she could unleash her outrage. Then I blocked the number. The next day, another number. I almost laughed when I recognized the saccharine tone. Megan, dear, said Carol, Harry's mother. Her voice dripped with concern, the kind she reserved for appearances. We're all so worried. This isn't like you. Surely this is just a spat. Couples fight. You don't throw away an engagement over... This wasn't a spat, Carol, I interrupted. My tone was polite, but my spine was steel. The relationship is over. Please don't call again. She sputtered, tried to sound wounded. You're making a mistake, sweetheart. Let's just talk, all of us. Goodbye, Carol. Click. Blocked. Each call was weaker than the last, as though the outrage drained once they realized I wasn't playing the role assigned to me, the desperate woman clinging to a broken man. I wasn't clinging, I was severing. That night I stood in the middle of my apartment staring at the 6 empty spaces where his boxes had once sat. The room felt brighter, as if I'd rearranged the furniture of my soul. Still something lingered. Not love, not even grief. Just the faint static of old habits. The reflex to check my phone for his messages. The urge to save him from himself. So I made it harder for those ghosts to find me. I went through every digital tether. Instagram blocked. Facebook blocked. WhatsApp deleted, the chat blocked. Email filtered directly to trash. Each click was like cutting a thread from a puppet I no longer wanted to control. When I finished, I sat back in my chair. The screen glowed blankly, almost relieved. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with Harry's moods, his demands, his need to be seen. The silence was intoxicating. But silence, I learned, can be fragile. On the third day, the superintendent slid an envelope under my door. Inside was the receipt from the storage facility, signed and dated. Harry had collected his things. That night, I dreamed of him, not of us. Happy those memories had already dulled, but of him standing in the resort lobby, suitcase in hand, watching me leave. In the dream, his face was blank, unreadable. When I woke, I realized I'd never actually looked back to see his expression, and I never would. The phone rang again a week later. This time I didn't answer. The voicemail, though, I couldn't resist listening to. "Megan, it's Ben," came the familiar voice of our mutual friend. "Don't worry, I'm not calling about Harry, just checking in." I exhaled, relief flooding me. Ben was neutral territory, a tether to the world outside the collapse. When we met for coffee, he watched me over the rim of his mug. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" "Like you finally dropped a weight you didn't know you were carrying." I smiled faintly. That's not far from the truth. He didn't push. For that I was grateful. But Harry's family didn't give up easily. 2 weeks later, I found a letter wedged under my door. The handwriting was Carol's, looping and over-perfumed. "Megan, please reconsider. Harry is lost without you. He says Lila tricked him and he's devastated. Surely you won't abandon him at his lowest. Marriage is about forgiveness." I didn't finish reading. I tore the letter into strips, dropped them in the trash, and washed my hands. The scent of her perfume clung to my skin, so I scrubbed harder until it was gone. Some nights I caught myself wondering what Harry was saying about me. Was I the villain in his story now? The cold woman who walked away. Did he paint himself as the victim of a cruel, joyless fiancé who couldn't compete with Lila's sparkle? Maybe, probably. But the beauty of silence is that I no longer cared. His story no longer included me, and mine no longer needed him. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted my apartment in gold, I stood by the window holding a glass of water. Not wine water. Simple, clear, necessary. I thought about how strange it was that liberation could look so ordinary. It wasn't fireworks or grand declarations. It was the sound of keys clicking in a new lock, the absence of a name on my phone screen, the soft hum of a space that was mine alone. That's what cutting ties really means. Not anger, not revenge. Just choosing peace over noise. And peace, I was discovering, could be addictive. Silence didn't just heal me, it gave me space to build. At first, my days felt strange without Harry's voice, his texts, his moods. For years, my life had been calibrated to him, what he wanted for dinner, where he wanted to go on weekends, how he reacted to my long hours. Without that constant background noise, the apartment felt cavernous like an empty cathedral. But in the stillness, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I had room. I started with my body. Not at the sleek boutique gym Harry once insisted we join because everyone from work is there. No, I signed up at a gritty warehouse gym 5 blocks away. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the walls smelled faintly of iron and sweat, and the people there weren't polished, they were working. The first week nearly killed me. My muscles screamed, my breath burned. But there was a purity in it. Pain I could measure, pain I could control. Each rep scrubbed away another layer of residue left behind from years of carrying him. By the end of the month, my reflection had changed. Not just leaner, stronger, but steadier. There was power in my shoulders, confidence in my posture. For the first time in years, my body felt like mine. Next came my mind. One evening, while rummaging through the closet, I found a dusty guitar case, my old acoustic, the one I hadn't touched in years, because Harry complained my playing was distracting. I tuned it clumsily, strings squealing. My fingers were clumsy at first, skin soft from disuse, but muscle memory returned in fragments. Chords, melodies, old songs I used to love. Soon the apartment wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with imperfect music, each note a reminder that I could create beauty without anyone's permission. And then there was work. The energy I once wasted analyzing Harry's moods, smoothing his ego, planning our couple-centric calendar, I poured all of it into my projects. Hours at the drafting table flew by. My sketches grew bolder, sharper. 3 weeks later, my boss Miranda called me into her office. "Megan, the designs for the Saharazada Tower, brilliant. The client is thrilled." She leaned back in her chair, smiling. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but keep it up. There's a senior associate position opening next quarter. I'm putting your name forward." I blinked. "Thank you. Really?" Walking back to my desk, I realized my chest wasn't heavy anymore. It was expanding, stretching, to hold something new possibility. Of course, Harry's shadow lingered. Not directly, he had no way to reach me now, but in whispers that traveled through mutual acquaintances. I was at a bar with Sophia, my oldest friend, when she dropped it casually between sips of wine. So, did you hear about him? My stomach tightened, but I forced my voice steady. What about him? She gave me a sideways glance. Lila. She wasn't what he thought. I raised an eyebrow, meaning she played him. Fake name, fake number, that villa she bragged about day pass. She conned her way into. The morning after she ditched him, he woke up alone, wallet lighter, ego shredded. I sat still, swirling my glass. A younger version of me might have smirked, reveled in the poetic justice. But now I felt nothing. Sophia continued, lowering her voice. When he got back, tail between his legs, he found out you'd changed the locks. Word got around. Let's just say his friends aren't exactly sympathetic. He looks pathetic. I finally looked at her. And you're telling me this because... She shrugged. Because I thought you'd want to know. I shook my head. I don't. Not anymore. The words surprised me by how true they felt. That night, lying in bed, I thought about it. How the universe had served Harry the consequences of his choices on a silver platter. How neatly the arc of his downfall matched the moment I decided to rise. And still I felt no vindication. Just distance. It was like hearing news about a city I once lived in but no longer cared to visit. Floods, fires, scandals, it didn't matter. I didn't live there anymore. A month passed. My routines solidified into rituals. Gym in the morning, sweat dripping, heart pounding. Work during the day, sketches turning into blueprints, turning into contracts. Guitar in the evening, strings biting into my fingertips, music echoing off the walls. The loneliness that had terrified me at first became something else. Solitude. And solitude became strength. One Sunday morning, sunlight spilling across my desk, I caught myself humming as I made coffee. Not nervous humming, not to fill silence, but genuine careless. I froze for a moment, mug in hand. When had that started? The realization startled me. I was happy. Not euphoric, not dependent on someone else's attention. Just quietly happy. I didn't need Harry to collapse for me to rise. I was rising because he was no longer weighing me down. The universe, however, wasn't done testing me. It started with a text from an unknown number. Megan, it's me. I made a huge mistake. Please just talk to me. I stared at the screen, waiting for the sting, the rush of old emotions. Nothing came. It was like reading spam mail. I blocked the number. A week later, another text, another unknown number, another plea. I blocked that too. The silence returned stronger this time. Then came the voicemail. I was reviewing blueprints one evening when my phone buzzed. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, curiosity got the better of me. His voice trembled thin. Hey, it's me. Please, just talk to me. She was a liar. She used me. I get it now. You were the real one. You were stable. Good. I'm so sorry. Please. A muffled sob. Then the line cut. I deleted it. Not because I was angry. Because I refused to let his desperation take up space in my life again. You were the real one. That was what he said. Not I love you. Not I was wrong. Just that I was real compared to the fantasy that had burned him. It wasn't an apology. It was an insult dressed as one. I turned off the phone, placed it face down on the table, and returned to my work. As my pen traced clean lines across the page, I felt a certainty settle deep in my bones. The rebuild wasn't about erasing him. It was about constructing something stronger, something only mine. And for the first time in years, the foundation felt unshakable. For a while, the silence held. It was golden protective, like a wall I had finally built around myself. But walls, I learned, can always be tested. The first crack came late on a Tuesday. I had just come back from the gym, sweat still drying on my skin, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something tugged at me. Megan, it's me. Please. I made a mistake. I know I don't deserve you, but we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time. The old Megan, the one who used to soothe and fix, would have replied, would have softened. This Megan didn't hesitate. Block. A week later, another number. Megan, I can explain. It wasn't what you think. Lila, she tricked me. Please don't give up on us. Us. The word felt obscene, like graffiti on a clean wall. Block. Then came the voicemail. I was at my drafting table tracing lines with calm precision when the phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I let it ring out. Minutes later, the notification blinked. I should have ignored it. Instead, I pressed play. Megan. His voice was thin, trembling like a child caught in a storm. Please just talk to me. She lied. She used me. I see it now. You were the real one. You're stable. You're good. I was stupid. I'm sorry." A sob cracked through the line, then silence. I deleted it. "You're the real one. Not I love you. Not I was a fool. Just that I was safe, dependable." A consolation prize after his fantasy crumbled. It wasn't love, it was survival, and I refused to be his lifeboat. But desperation has a way of escalating. One evening, after a brutal leg day at the gym, I walked into the parking lot, muscles aching, endorphins buzzing in my veins. The night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of traffic. And then I heard it. Megan. My name raw and desperate ripped out of a throat I once kissed. I turned. He was leaning against the hood of a dented sedan, not the sleek car he used to polish every Sunday. This one looked borrowed tired. He looked worse. His hair hung limp, his clothes wrinkled, his eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. The vibrant man who once stood tall beside me was gone. In his place was a hollowed-out version, arms wrapped around himself as if bracing against wind. I didn't move closer. I didn't speak. I just waited. He pushed off the car, taking a hesitant step forward. His voice cracked. "You can't just ignore me forever. We were together for 4 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" I stayed silent. My face was a mask I'd perfected, neutral, unreadable. "Say something," he pleaded, his composure breaking. His eyes glistened, his mouth trembling. "Please, just talk to me." I tilted my head slightly. "Can I help you?" The words landed like stones. His face crumpled. "Help me." His voice rose fractured. "Look at me, Megan. I lost everything. My home, my friends. You. She was a monster, a liar. I was blind, and now I'm nothing without you." He took another step closer, his desperation thick in the air. He was waiting for me to fold, to rush into his arms to remind him that he still mattered. But I didn't move. The tears came, then streaming down his face. His sobs echoed in the near-empty lot, bouncing off the concrete. For a moment, I saw him as he wanted me to broken, pitiable, in need of saving. But I also saw the truth. The same man who had smirked over his shoulder at that white party, his hands on another woman's back. The same man who had texted me not to make a scene. He wasn't broken for me. He was broken for himself. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly. It wasn't sympathy. It was dismissal. A hand pushing his chaos back where it belonged, outside my walls. His sobbing stopped. His blotchy face, hardened eyes flashing with anger. "That's it." His voice shook with fury now. "Sorry you feel that way. You're supposed to be the good one, the stable one. Why are you being so cruel?" And there it was, the truth he couldn't hide. I wasn't cruel for leaving. I was cruel for refusing to return, for refusing to play my part in his endless drama. I straightened, letting my voice cut like glass. "Harry, you told me not to make a scene." His mouth fell open, the words hitting him like a slap. "So I didn't," I continued. "You left me in that resort the moment you chose her. That man, the one who would fight, yell, beg for you. You left him behind. I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't want to." He stared at me stunned, the anger draining into horror. He realized finally that he had no power left. The leash was cut. The tie was gone. "Megan." His voice was small now, barely a whisper. "We're done." I shook my head slowly, almost pitying him. "We've been done. I just moved on. You should try it." I stepped past him, the smell of stale cologne and desperation clinging to the night air. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. I didn't look back as I pulled away, leaving him standing under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. For years, he had been my world. Now he was just a lonely figure in a parking lot. And for the first time, I understood the power of indifference. I thought the parking lot would be the last time, that after he saw the wall in my eyes, he'd finally understand. But desperation doesn't fade easily, it mutates. For weeks, he lingered at the edges of my life like smoke from a fire I'd already extinguished. More blocked numbers, more voicemails I never listened to. Notes left with the superintendent that went straight into the trash. Flowers left at my door wilted before I bothered to throw them out. The old me would have pitied him. The Megan who begged him to stay, who twisted herself into knots to keep him happy, would have softened, but she was gone. And the woman who replaced her had no intention of being dragged back into the ash. It was a Saturday evening when the final confrontation came. I'd just returned from the gym, sweat cooling on my skin bag slung over my shoulder. The hall outside my apartment smelled faintly of detergent, quiet, and domestic. And there he was, sitting cross-legged on the floor outside my door like a penitent child, his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed hollow. "Megan," his voice cracked. "Please, just 5 minutes." I sighed, sliding the strap of my bag off my shoulder. "Harry, you need to leave." "Please," he whispered. I can't lose you. You don't understand. I was stupid, I was blind, but I'm awake now." His words spilled like broken glass, sharp and desperate. I didn't unlock the door. I didn't invite him inside. I stood arms crossed the wall between us, more solid than the wood and metal behind me. "You told me not to make a scene," I said quietly. He flinched, remembering. "And I didn't. I left. I built a life without you. And now you're here begging me to relive the moment you ended us, as if you get to rewrite it." His jaw trembled. "I made a mistake. Don't throw away 4 years over what?" I snapped, my voice finally cracking through the calm. "Over you laughing in another woman's arms. Over you choosing her sparkle over my steadiness. Over the text you sent me while you were in her bed." He swallowed, hard shame written across his face. "You didn't just cheat Harry. You humiliated me. You erased me. And now that she erased you, suddenly I'm the safe option again." "That's not true," he whispered. "Isn't it?" I shot back. "You didn't say you loved me. You said I was the real one, the stable one. You don't want me. You want the version of yourself that existed when I was still holding you up. That's not love. That's convenience." His voice rose sharp and panicked. "You're supposed to be better than this. You're supposed to forgive. You're supposed to be stable." I cut in my tone like ice. "Predictable. The one who swallows the hurt. While you chase glitter. No, Harry. I'm not your safety net. Not anymore." His anger faltered, twisting back into pleading. He dropped to his knees, hands clasped like a man praying. "Please, Megan, I can change. Just give me another chance." I looked down at him, this hollow figure who once claimed to be my partner, and I realized something startling. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was bored. The story was over, and he didn't realize the final page had already been turned. "You want me to fight for you?" I said softly. "To yell, to cry, to beg. But the man who would have done that, you left him on a dance floor in Mexico. I don't know who you are now. And frankly, I don't care." His mouth opened closed like he was drowning. "We're done, Harry." I continued, my voice calm now, steady as stone. "Not because you cheated, not because she left you, but because I outgrew the version of me who tolerated you." I bent, picked up my gym bag, and pulled out the set of keys I'd had duplicated weeks ago. Without ceremony, I dropped them into his lap. "That's the last piece of me you'll ever hold." He stared at the keys, confusion warring with devastation. "So, that's it." I nodded. "That's it." And with that, I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me. I leaned against the wood for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of his breath outside, waiting for the knock that never came. Eventually, I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall, slow, defeated. I exhaled, not in relief, in confirmation. It was over, completely. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting golden lines across the hardwood. I brewed coffee, strummed a lazy chord on my guitar, and let the quiet fill me. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of strength, of possibility, of me. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what he did or didn't give me. And I didn't need his absence to feel whole, because wholeness was something I had built myself. When you strip your life down to silence, you discover what echoes back. At first, those echoes were sharp memories of Harry's laugh, the sting of that text, the ghost of his hand brushing mine. But over time, those echoes softened, then vanished. And in their place came something unexpected. Music. Not just from my guitar, though. The chords I played at night had grown smoother, stronger. It was the music of routine, of small joys. The kettle whistling in the morning. My sneakers slapping pavement on my way to the gym. The hum of my drafting pen across crisp paper. Ordinary sounds, but together they formed a symphony of something I'd forgotten I could have a life that was mine alone. 3 months after Mexico, my apartment no longer looked like a museum of a failed engagement. The framed photos were gone, replaced with prints I'd always liked, but never hung, because Harry said they were too moody. The ugly vest from his mother had been dropped off at a donation bin. The couch once shared was now draped with a quilt my grandmother made warm, familiar mine. The space breathed with me now. At work, the promotion came through. Senior associate. Miranda announced it in a meeting, her voice carrying a warmth that made me blush. My colleagues clapped, some sincerely, some out of obligation, but I didn't care. That night, I stood on the balcony of my office, city lights twinkling below, and let the cool wind whip through my hair. I'd poured so much of myself into Harry, into keeping us alive, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to pour into me. And now I was overflowing. One evening, Sophia came over with a bottle of red wine. We sat on the floor, cross-legged like we used to in college. "You're glowing," she said, topping off my glass. I laughed. "That's just sweat from the gym." "No, seriously. I haven't seen you this alive in years. It's like you finally exhaled after holding your breath for too long." I thought about that, about the months I'd spent suffocating under Harry's constant hunger for more excitement, more sparkle, more energy, and how now breathing felt effortless. "Maybe I finally realize I don't need someone else's air to survive," I said. Sophia raised her glass. "To breathing." We clinked, and I felt the truth of it settle deep in my chest. Of course, Harry's name still floated around in whispers. Mutual friends mentioned him sometimes, unable to help themselves. "He's not doing well," Ben told me one afternoon over coffee. "Job's shaky, family's frustrated with him. Word is he's moving back in with his mom." I sipped my latte, expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." Ben blinked. "Really? Sorry in the way I'd be if it rained on someone else's wedding day," I said. "It doesn't touch me. Not anymore." And it was true. The knowledge didn't tighten my chest or spark vindication. It was just data about a man I once knew. One Saturday morning, I sat on my balcony with my guitar in my lap. The sun warmed my bare feet, the city hummed faintly in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I let my mind wander to the future. Not the future Harry and I had once sketched in late-night conversations, house kids' vacations we never took. My future. I imagined projects I wanted to design, places I might travel, maybe even people I might one day let into my life again. The thought didn't scare me. It didn't even ache. It just glowed softly, like a lantern lit for some unknown traveler who hadn't yet arrived. Later that evening, I found myself writing in a notebook I hadn't touched in years. Words spilled without pressure, not about him, not about loss, but about strength. About how endings can sometimes feel like beginnings in disguise. And I realized that was the real twist of it all. The story I thought was about Harry's betrayal was actually about my rebirth. A week later, I passed by the same beach from a photograph Harry and I once loved. Blue Ridge Mountains, in the background, us smiling in the foreground. I'd kept the picture in a drawer for months, unsure whether to throw it out. Now looking at it, I saw something different. Not pain, not nostalgia, just a younger version of myself who hadn't yet learned what she could survive. I slid the photo back into the drawer, but this time without bitterness. That girl had gotten me here. That night, as I closed the blinds, I caught my reflection in the glass. My eyes were clear, my shoulders steady, my mouth curved into the smallest of smiles. I whispered to the empty room, "You told me not to make a scene, so I didn't." And in the quiet, I felt the weight of that choice. It wasn't cowardice, it wasn't weakness. It was strength distilled, the kind that doesn't shout but endures. Life didn't explode into fireworks after Harry. It unfolded in small, steady ways. Mornings with coffee and music, nights with friends and laughter, work that challenged me, solitude that soothed me. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for betrayal. I was simply living step by step, note by note. When people ask me now if I regret what happened, I tell them the truth. I don't. Because sometimes you need to be burned down to discover you were always capable of rising. And me, I didn't just rise. I rebuilt.